Salam, my name's Amr, and this is Why'd You Do That PF2E. Pathfinder 2nd Edition is my favorite tabletop role-playing game. It might be my forever game. And on this channel, I want to go into what the game does, why the game does what it does, and what it can mean for a fun game for you and your friends. In my last video, I talked about the new supplement that I made. It's called OriginPath, and as promised, in this video, I'm going to go through the system, which is an enhancement to Pathfinder 2nd Edition's character creation system, and create a character, which is the whole point of it, and show you how it can benefit any session 0 of your game, and especially if you want to either teach somebody the game or learn the game yourself. Okay, so I'm just going to go into the actual system itself and dive right in and start with stage 1 of the OriginPath system, which is equivalent to step 1 of the character creation steps of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition player core rulebook. Really, this is an addition and an enhancement to the Pathfinder 2nd Edition core rulebook, so you're going to need to have access to those rules. They're free online, or the rulebook itself. And this stage 1 is to come up with a concept. Now, inspiration for this can come from anywhere, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into just randomly picking options and seeing what you get, which is mentioned here as an option if you're truly stumped on how to create a character among the hundreds of different options that Pathfinder 2nd Edition provides. There's a few tips in here about character creation. For example, the class that you pick is going to be very important to how the character plays, and also that the class that you pick is going to provide a key attribute. And a very simple tip to create a character that is going to be effective is to just make that attribute as high as possible as you go through the character creation steps. So that's stage 1, and I'm going to be doing everything randomly, but before that we go through stage 2. That is tracing through the life of your brand new character right from the fact that you are a newborn. This is going to be introducing the very basic concepts of Pathfinder 2nd Edition and tabletop role-playing games in general, but including the things that make Pathfinder 2nd Edition special as well. The point of the system is to kind of, as a backstory enhancement, trace through the entire life story of your new character. Here is where the character sheet tutorial part of the system comes into play. So I'm going to bring up a character sheet, which is form fillable here, and it says, actually in here, it says put 0 in all attribute modifiers on a character sheet, right? And currently, and more information will be provided as needed. Really, I've tried to make the system just basically bite-sized, just introducing concepts as they're needed. So right now, just putting 0 in all the attribute modifiers is all that is being asked for in terms of the character sheet. So I did that. Now, going back to the system, the roleplay prompt is that you are a baby, the equivalent of an 8-month-old human child, and you have just woken up from a nap. You are lying down. Basically, it asks, describe what you see. For example, what does your sleeping area look like? Who is around you? Things like that. And really, this gets into the role-playing part of the game, which is just as important as, like, you know, the rolling dice and all of the other good stuff. Since I'm going completely randomly, I'm just saying I'm a baby, I get up, I see a crib. Those are 2 of the parts done to this character creation, the character sheet part and the roleplay part. Now we're getting into the mechanics. Having woken up and being in a good mood, you want to practice all the wonderful things you have been teaching yourself to do. Exciting things like standing and walking and running. This is what you're going to attempt to do. So in this, not only are you prompted about who you are, what's going on, but also introduces a guided sort of a gameplay snippet is what I've called it in here, what it is that this section is going to do. Since this is the first section and we're teaching the game, it talks a little bit about the difficulty class, the action economy, and things like that. And it also introduces a reaction, which is a custom reaction for this game, which is prevent hurt. It goes into what that is. It'll only come up if needed. What you're being prompted to do now is stand up. Standing up is becoming very easy for you as you've been doing it for a while. It is still not automatic, and so the difficulty class assigned is very low 5. Attempting this probably takes 1 action out of the 3 you have. You are ready to move on to the next stage once you have used up all 3 of your actions. So this is the 3 action economy being introduced, and this is the concept of rolling a dice and hitting a difficulty class is introduced here. And I think it's a fun way of introducing the basics of a role-playing game, especially a D20 role-playing game like Pathfinder, and its unique action economy as well. So that's what I'm going to do. I am going to bring up my roller here, and I am going to roll a d20. As you can see, I had just a test here and it didn't go very well, but let's see what happens with this. It's on random.org that I'm doing this, and I've got a 3. So since this is the first time that you might be rolling a dice and all of that sort of good stuff, I have gone into exactly what happens. If you roll a 2 or higher, but below 5, then you have a failure. You try as hard as you can, but you're just not able to muster the strength and skill that you have shown before and stay on your belly, looking around in frustration. You have used one of your 3 actions, but have not succeeded in standing up. So, now, if your character has failed at this task, what do they choose to do next is up to you, and maybe a herald of how they will act in the future. Do they try again, or do they give up? Just a little bit of role-playing as a baby. It's fun, just so that I don't stop. I'm going to try again. I'm going to try again with my second action, and I get another 3, and then I'm going to try one more time to stand up and call it a day. 5. 5. Look at that. If you roll a 5 or higher but below 15, success. You heft yourself up and come to your feet. A bit unsteady, but successful. You have used one of your 3 actions and are now standing up and ready for what's next. If you want to keep going, or your player wants to keep going and see all the other things that I have not been able to do here just because I've been rolling really badly, yeah, you can. And, but as you can see here, it introduces the 4 degrees of success system of the system as well. And if you want to go in and see what would have happened if you rolled a 15 or higher, it would have been a critical success, and it introduces that concept of that, as well as the natural 20 and natural 1 can come up here as well. That's the end of that stage. So now we're going to go on to stage 3 of OriginPath, which is equivalent to step 3 of the character creation system. And here you will actually start picking different options. Ancestry. And here, as you can see, I go into Ancestry do. So if you read over this game, it provides a little bit or more of a guide to what Pathfinder 2nd Edition already provides, and goes more detailed and more focused guides on what to do in the character sheet. So pick an ancestry from an allowed source and then a heritage from within that. So here is actually PF2 easy. It allows me to just take a look at exactly how many options there are in the player core rulebook, which is what I'm going to be using. So there are 8 ancestries that I have to pick up from. So I am going to go into my roller and choose between 1 and 8. See if I roll high this time. No. Well, in this case, rolling low is perfectly fine because it's just elf. So I'm going to be going into the elf option and say over here, your ancestry will provide your character with starting hit points, a size, and all the other things that it provides. Character sheet portion of it, it says write your character's ancestry. Write your character's ancestry and heritage in the appropriate space on your character sheet. I'm going to be picking a heritage as well. And in here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I believe, heritages. And there's 4 other heritages in there that I'm going to be adding in, which is the versatile heritages that are right in the player core rulebook. I'm going to be removing the half-elf heritage, so that's going to be between 1 and 9. And I get a 7. That's a high number for a change. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. None of these. And it's going to be one of the versatile heritages. A changeling. Pick an ancestry and then a heritage from within that. So the ancestry that we have is going to be elf. And the heritage is going to be changeling. So we're already making a changeling elf. So now it's talking about adjusting your attribute, adding 1 to an attribute if you've gained an attribute from your ancestry, and subtracting from an attribute if you've gained an attribute flaw from your ancestry. So going back to our character options, we are going to have, and I'm going to go ahead and just use the standard. There's another very good option here to just have 2 free boosts, but in this case I'm going to go ahead and put in a boost to dexterity and intelligence. And the adjusting the attribute and all of that sort of stuff is explained here. And since I really don't know what kind of character I am building at the moment, I am just going to go ahead and put in a boost to dexterity, boost to intelligence, and a free boost. Since it's a changeling, why not put it in charisma? And since I am going with this option, I need to put in the attribute flaw is to Constitution. So, -1 to Constitution. In OriginPath, it talks about skill of a character, describe the character's aptitude, and it goes into each of the skills, explains them a little bit. There's also a table here that explains what the attributes are. The game asks you to fill them out, so we can go ahead and start filling it out. Let's go through dexterity. We have a 1 in dexterity, so a 1 here, 1, 1. We have a 1 in intelligence, so that's arcana. Strength we don't, but crafting we do. Intelligence here. Charisma, we have deception, diplomacy, and intimidation. These are the charisma skills, and just as we're going through, we're putting it out. Well, whatever lores we may or may not have, they're intelligence as well, so we'll just go ahead and put them in here. Medicine is wisdom, which we do not have anything for. Occultism comes here, occultism. And as I go through here, if I was really learning the game, then I could go in and just read at what these skills actually mean and what they can mean. Not religion, society is there. So we're already creating a character that has a lot of skills, just because intelligence and dexterity and charisma are very important attributes in terms of skill use. So, done that part, this might indicate what kind of a character this is going to turn out to be. And then it talks about hit points and other abilities. So, going back to OriginPath, it talks about hit points and other abilities. So note the number of hit points your character gains from their ancestries, 6. Add 1 of your Constitution. It also talks about your modifier, in which case it actually matters because our changeling elf has a -1 to Constitution, 5 in the appropriate place. And then record your character size, speed, and languages. Again, going into the character option, going into basically everything that is provided by the game in elf. It is going to be common and elven for languages. And we'll put that into the character sheet. And then OriginPath also points out that there's going to be size, speed as well. Elf, we see size medium, so we put in size medium, and speed 30 feet. Also mentioned in here any special abilities that you get into the Ancestry ability section. So for example, we know in Elf we have fun things like low light vision, which we can put in here, and we can also put that into the census section over here. Low light vision. We have filled all of those things out as OriginPath guides you. Now we're going to talk about heritage. Each heritage provides some special abilities. Write them in the heritage abilities section. So now we're going to go into changeling. So we can see here, changeling right from the start senses low light vision or dark vision if your ancestry already has low light vision. So we already have a fun interaction here. We'll go into the character sheet and update our low light vision to be dark light vision. But that's it. That's one thing you've already got from your changeling heritage. Heading back to OriginPath. Okay, now we're talking about feats. This is the first time that we're actually going to be picking feats, and it talks a little bit about what feats are. At this stage of character creation, we're going to be choosing a feat that is tied to the character's ancestry, and these are called ancestry feats. Now, as we are a changeling elf, if you read the full rules of the game, you will know that we can pick from both the elven feats, first level elven feats, or the first level changeling feats. For elf feats, we have 7 elf feats. Here we have the changeling section, 7 possible changeling feats. But since we are going completely random, I'm going to pick up the roller again and go 6 plus, I think it was 7. 13 possible options, and we are rolling a 4. So my streak of rolling low continues. In elf, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is going to be a seer elf. A seer elf gives you an inborn ability to detect and understand magical phenomena. You can cast the detect magic cantrip as an arcane innate spell at will. And so this is becoming a very magical type of character. In addition, you gain a 1+1 circumstance bonus to checks to identify magic and to decipher writing. And so now we can enter all of these things into the character sheet. As you can see here in our character sheet, seer elf. So we have written it out, what Ancestry feat provides. Heading back to OriginPath, it notes your character might also start to exhibit spellcasting prowess at this early stage of their life. An example of this is, for example, First World Magic. In this case, we have Seer Elf, and it grants a spell. And in the stage 5 is where you usually get spellcasting as a part of your class, and so the rules around spellcasting and things like that you can find in stage 5. So I'm just going to go into stage 5 really quickly. It says here, while your character might have exhibited magical skill at an earlier stage of their life, like Seer Elves do, they will gain most of their spellcasting prowess from their class at this stage. These spells can be focus spells, cantrips, regular spells. In this case, what we have is a cantrip, and it talks about magical tradition, spell attack rolls, spell DCs, and things like that. One of the things that it talks about also is basically if you are having to choose a spell and maybe you aren't sure which spell to get, then just basically a few iconic spells in each tradition are provided over here. But in this case, since I have a Detect Magic as an arcane cantrip, this gives me enough information to go into the character sheet and go to the spell section, put in Detect Magic. And I can look up Detect Magic option and start putting that into the character sheet as well. And so basically, based off of those character options, I can see I have put in that there's an arcane magical tradition going on, and there is a Detect Magic cantrip and the number of actions and things like that that it has. Going back to stage 3, Ancestry. Okay, now that we've put in our spell, we are going back to the final stage of filling out the character sheet for this stage of character creation, and that is going into weapon gear. Usually in Pathfinder 2nd edition, you don't pick any gear until the end of character creation, but in this, since we're going to be playing through the stages of the life of our character, we are given, in OriginPath, two very basic weapons in here, and there's also a little bit of a mention here that if in case your character has a special weapon, that might be a good thing to substitute here instead of these two very basic options of a club and a crossbow. And so going back to the character sheet, going back to the weapon section, it's introducing how weapons work and all of that sort of good stuff already here. And it says here, we're in the write down club for one weapon in the melee section. Melee strikes over here, putting in club, and 1d6 plus the strength modifier of the character as damage. And B for damage type, bludgeoning. And since our character has no strength, their bonus is going to be a nice 0 here at this early stage of character creation. In the range section, we are going to put down hand crossbow. And this is going to be 1d6 piercing. And in this case, we are going to have a dexterity bonus, so we are going to have a nice 1 here at this stage. And it mentioned here as well that you might have a bite attack, you might have a dwarven clan dagger or something like that, and those would be excellent things to substitute. But in this case, if we do need to do an attack at some point as we were playing through our character's life, we at least have a club and a hand crossbow to do it. Now that you've written out the weapon gear, you can go in and go into the gameplay section of this, which is please refer to the ancestries and the character options and gameplay snippet section of the supplement to find the ancestry and heritage you have picked. Follow the roleplay and mechanic snippets of the gameplay that will introduce your newly gained ability. If you're getting an option that doesn't make sense until later parts of character creation, such as class key, class feat, or skill feat or general feat, then where do you delay the gameplay snippet for? And it also mentions that a skill feat or a general feat there's some things that haven't been provided. So this is the first time that we're going into that section of the game. And so let's skip ahead to that, character options and gameplay snippets. Here it talks about what these gameplay snippets are. They're very similar to what we've already done as a toddler, but for all of the different first level character options that there are, almost all of them. And basically says from stage 3 onward, your character will start to vary wildly, and it will have all of these different kinds of scenarios that you will be running into and all of these different character options that refer to different parts of the game are going to refer to different little aspects of how the game works. There's a little bit of talk here about how to work it, and it also has this section which is all the different challenge types. And as you run into these different kinds of challenge types, you go back and you will refer to these to learn how they work. So let's go ahead to Seer Elf. And Seer Elf basically says, here's the gameplay snippet, here's a scenario. Browsing a library, feeling the urge to cast a spell, and casting Detect Magic for the first time. And discovering a tome amidst all the mundane books. So essentially, this is the scenario in which there's a milestone in your Changeling Elf, Seer Elf's early life where they discover that they can cast Detect Magic, and they're doing so in a place where that actually leads to something interesting, right? So the roleplay prompts are questions that you ask yourself to basically get into the character, and this can be used even if you aren't learning the game or learning how to do the character sheet. This is going to be something that is going to be just a fun way of getting into your character. Whenever you pick another option, in this case it's, is this a library you know well or a new one? How do you feel about casting a spell for the very first time? And what does the tome look like? Going back to here, it says challenge type, cast a spell, and skill check. And so if this is the first time you're playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition, not exactly certain how spells work, this says that it's going to be casting a spell and skill check are the two things that you are going to be doing. And so you're going to go back to the challenge type section, and you can see here there's a cast a spell section which goes into how spells work in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and also the skill check section, which is something that's already kind of happened because walking and standing, all of those things that we did in the newborn stage are things that we've already done, and talking about skill checks that way. Once we read up on that, we are going to be ready to go through this. It tells you what game mode, which is also a part of the introduction to this section. It'll tell you what encounter mode and exploration mode is. And in this case, it says in encounter mode, you're going to be casting the Detect Magic cantrip. And then in exploration mode, after you cast the Detect Magic cantrip and follow the rules of the spell, it'll also tell you roll the Arcana skill to use the Decipher writing activity to try and figure out the details of the tome. Seer Elf provides the spell, and Seer Elf provides the bonus to these types of checks. And also in here, in the Ancestry section, it also gives you a guide on how to use the DC. So basically, a fair challenge is going to be 11. And for easier challenges, we can adjust to 9 or a 10. Or if you want to make it harder for yourself or for your players, you can make it a 12 or a 13. And so now you have an idea that you're going to be trying to roll a DC 11 in this case. Bringing up the character sheet again, bringing up the character options again to look at Detect Magic. And in this case, you discover the presence of magic. Have felt the urge to cast this innate spell that you might not have even known you had. You do it for the first time, and as the gameplay snippet says, you discover a magical tome. And then since you've discovered a magical tome, you are going to spend some time rolling the Arcana skill to use the Decipher writing activity. All of this is explained in the skill check section of the guide of the challenge type. And our Arcana skill from our character sheet that we filled out before, we can see our Arcana skill is a 1, and we are rolling a d20, and then we're going to be adding a 1 to it. And so let us bring up our roller. Hope for a 1 to 20, a decent roll for a change, and I get a 12. 12 plus 1, 13. Therefore, I have succeeded at the Arcana skill to use the Decipher writing activity, and I know what kind of a tome it is now. And so this is what happened to me early in my life. Okay, so now that we've done that, let us go back. We're done with stage 3 of character creation, which is step 3 of character creation. We've picked a feat. We're learning how to play the game and how the different character options work. Spellcasting in this case and skill checks. And now we are ready for stage 4, which is adult. This stage is equivalent to step 4 of character creation, and we are into the ABCs of character creation. If you've heard that, we're in B now, background. Here you will continue to build your character as they mature from a young person into an adult who has gained experience and knowledge in a vocation. If you want to create a character that just never becomes an adventurer, you can just stop here. But in any case, as a character option, we pick a background from an allowed source. And now this is going to be one of the ones in which there are a lot of character options to pick from, because according to Pathfinder 2 Easy, there are 40 backgrounds in the game. So we're going to pop up a roller. We are going to roll between 1 and 40 in this case. 17. I'm getting a little bit worried about how I'm rolling here. It's low all the time, but let's go to the 17th background option. So yeah, so all the way in page 45 is where the backgrounds are. So you can see a lot of what is in the OriginPath system is just going through. Previously, it was all of the different Ancestry options, but we only needed a few of them. The Changeling, the Elf, and the Seer Elf. And now we're in background. It gives you a little bit of the same kind of information about the base DC now going up to 12. And since we have 17, we have guard. That might not be exact, but I think it's good enough. So we have a guard. So our Seer Elf, magical changeling, has decided to, instead of going more into the magical part of their heritage, has decided instead to be a guard. So that is interesting, and it's a fun character concept, I think. I wouldn't mind playing this, I think, depending on what the class becomes. And so if we go into our character options, we have our guard over here. And before we go into the guard, I am going to go back into stage 4. Here, it says, after you've picked a background from an allowed source, we picked guard, we are going to write it in the appropriate space on your character sheet. And then also, typically backgrounds grant 2 attribute views, the trained proficiency rank and 2 skills, one of which is a lower skill, and finally a skill feat. That's the basic background, and certainly in the player core rulebook, that is how I think all the backgrounds work. And adjust your attribute just as was done when an ancestry was picked. Remember, no attribute can be boosted more than once per step of character creation. So, going into our character sheet and our character options. Character option says that we choose 2 strength, 2 attribute boosts. One must be the strength or charisma, and one is a free attribute boost. So, since we are going into being a guard, what I'm going to do over here is I am going to lean into the fact of having charisma. So I'm going to boost my charisma by 1, that at 2. And I am going to actually make my constitution a little bit better because I'm a guard, so I need to have at least a little bit of constitution. So I'm going to update my constitution. And because of this, just like in Ancestry, I am going to go ahead and improve my skills, and actually my hit points go up to 6, because I remember that in Constitution affect hit points. And in terms of charisma, basically all of the charisma abilities, which are deception, diplomacy, and intimidation, I have gotten a little bit better. So put that in there as well. And then it also talks about proficiency for the very first time. Now, you might have run into proficiency in your earlier stages, just as we ran into spellcasting. But in this case, we are going to talk about proficiency for the first time in the background. And if you pop up our character options, we will see that it says that we get training in the intimidation skill and the legal lore or warfare lore skill. You gain the quick coercion skill feat. So, in terms of this, I've already done my attributes over here, and it says I'm trained in the intimidation skill. And so I'm going to add that intimidation over here. And in terms of legal lore or warfare lore, you know what? I'm just going to make that a roll as well. 1, I get legal lore, which actually kind of works with this kind of like more detective-like character that seems to be created. And I'm going to put a training in here as well. And the quick coercion skill feat. So I am going to, since I'm getting used to how this works, I'm just going to put quick coercion in here for now. And then I am going to go back into what OriginPath says about all of it. Typically, backgrounds grant proficiency. This is the first time we're talking about proficiency. Proficiency is a system that measures a character's aptitude at a specific level or capability, and it has 5 ranks: untrained, trained, expert, master, and legendary. It talks about how it works, and if you're trained, expert, your proficiency update equals. At this early part, you can only be either untrained, don't get any proficiency bonuses, or trained, in which case you add your level plus 2. Now, since your character is not even level 1 yet, this means they add 2 to any role or benefit they are trained in. So, since I have become trained in intimidation, and in legal lore, now I know what that means. I go in and I say, okay, you know what? I've got a intimidation training, so proficiency of 2 there, and I've got legal lore training right next to each other, convenient. And I can see my intimidation has popped up to 4 and my legal lore has become 3, right? So that is that part, and then it talks about skill feats. We've already gone through a skill feat with, well, we went through an ancestry feat, so we have a bit of an idea about those, how those work now. With the seer elf, now we have the quick coercion skill feat. It talks about, it gives you a little bit of an example of how that works, but we are becoming rapidly better at Pathfinder 2nd edition, so we are going to go into our character options, and we are going to find quick coercion, which is an intimidation skill feat, and you can bully others with just a few choice implications. You can coerce a creature after 1 round of conversation instead of 1 minute. Can't do it in the midst of combat or without engaging in conversation. You can really quickly put that in there, coerce a creature in 1 round, not a minute, and note that it's not in combat. That's how quick coercion works. Now that we've done that, we put in the skill feat, we put in our proficiency, and we have added our attributes boosts in. We can go into the gameplay section. Okay, now we have guard. This is the scenario. You're dealing with a belligerent drunk who is causing trouble outside of an inn. You try and scare them to not causing a scene anymore and consider how you're going to deal with them. Roleplay prompts are things like, as a guard, did you focus on legal lore or warfare lore? As we saw in our random roll, it turned out to be legal lore. Why did you choose that? Do you know who the drunk person is? Do you enjoy your guard job? And what kind of community are you responsible for? So in all of these sorts of things, you can start talking about, you can start creating a character. So in this case, this, you know, fairly intelligent and charismatic elf who is able to detect magic has decided to safeguard their community. Let's say it's some sort of a elven community in the forest. They went into legal lore because, you know, their sharp mind is able to do those sorts of things pretty well. They go into it for more of investigating things rather than other things. But as a guard, they still have to deal with things like possible brawl outside of a pub. The mechanics are skill check. We've done skill checks before, and it's basically roll the intimidation skill to use the coerce activity to force the drunk to behave. Now in this, you can take a look at the intimidation skill. You can take a look at you can look up the coerce activity, look up how those things work, because these are possibly the first time they've come up in your brand new character's life, and maybe for you as you're playing the game. But in any case, we have exactly what we need to do. We are going to, as the skill check says, roll a 1d20 and add our intimidation skill to the game, to intimidation skill. As our character sheet says, we have a 4 in the intimidation, +4, and then from there we can go ahead and roll our 1d20 +4. Let's go to the roller and hope for a large number. 17. So 17 plus 4 is a 21. And as we took a look in the OriginPath system for backgrounds, the fair DC is 12. As we are learning, this is not quite a critical success, but just to see what happens, let's drop it down to the DC being 11 instead of 12, and so 17 plus 4 gives us 21, which makes it a critical success, just to see how those work. Take a look at the coerce activity, and with threats either veiled or overt, you attempt to bully a creature into doing what you want. We can do it within 1 round instead of 1 minute. And in terms of critical success, the target gives you the information you seek or agrees to follow your directives so long as they aren't likely to harm the target in any way. So in this case, since you critically succeeded at dealing with the drunk, what do you tell them to do? That becomes a part of the gameplay snippet. In this early stage, maybe this is your first patrol of the guard, or maybe you're an old hat, whatever little story that you can come up with from the roleplay prompts of the guard, and you critically succeeding, kind of tells you what kind of character that you're becoming too. That is the end of this stage of character creation. Okay, so now let's go on stage 5. This is the big one, Neophyte Adventurer. Now this is equivalent to step 5 of character creation, and it is the C of the ABC. At this point, you have either left your old vacation behind or delved into mastering its intricacies as you get your class. Character options, pick a class from an allowed source. Again, we are going with Pathfinder 2nd Edition core rulebook, and we are going to be picking a class from that allowed source. Okay, so as you can see, we have 8 classes to pick from. And so let's roll between a 1 and an 8 and see what our changeling, seer, elf, and that's going to be 6. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to be a rogue. So this elf, who has better nighttime vision than most of his elf friends and who can detect magic at will, has gone from being a guard to being a rogue. So I would like to play this character. I enjoy playing rogues, and having a detect magic cantrip at will as a rogue is really interesting. So let us go to rogue. In the character sheet, you're going to rate the class in the appropriate space. Now, classes provide many different capabilities, including hit point. We are going to go into the rogue class right from here, see what it says. You are skilled and opportunistic, etc. All of those things. Now, hit points is 8 plus your constitution modifier. So let's do that. And then so in here in the character sheet, it says, you know, a lot of different things. Let's start with, for example, one thing I didn't do, I didn't write my background in. Guard here, and then in here I'm going to write rogue. And then in my hit points, again, my constitution is still a 0, and it is going to be 6 plus 8, which is 14, unless I'm wrong. 14 hit points, so again, way sturdier than before, especially as a -1 young elf, going from 5 to 14. And in here, we go back to our character, let me pop up my character sheet to show you what I did. I put down guard and rogue. I updated my hit points. And now going back into the rogue, I see the next thing. And in OriginPath, role-playing, it talks about the role-playing section. It talks about initial proficiencies that rogues get. Now, one thing that rogues are special, in a lot of situations, it will tell you exactly what your character key attribute is, but in this case, rogues are special because they can have dexterity, strength, intelligence, or charisma based on the rogue's racket. So let's go ahead and figure that one out, because that is going to be important. Pathfinder core rulebook, we can just jump ahead to rogue in here to look at them. We have masterminds, ruffians, scoundrels, and thieves. So it's a choice between 4. You know what? In terms of this, since I know a little bit about this, I am going to take ruffian off, because the way the character is going, I don't think ruffian kind of fits. So I'm going to modify this a little bit just for fun, and to make like a more realistic character, I'm going to, because ruffians are basically very strength-based, a very strength-based racket. Mastermind, scoundrel, and thief works much better for me, so I'm just going to go up to my roller, roll between 1 and 3. And you know, OriginPath, the whole point of this is to just have fun and figure out your character. There's no set rule, especially in terms of when you're rolling randomly. There's no real rule for that either. And in this case, see, if I had, instead of getting a ruffian, I am going to be instead a scoundrel. So our guard has instead become a scoundrel. Look up the scoundrel racket. Scoundrel. You are better at feinting, going to be trained in deception and diplomacy. You can choose charisma as your key attribute. So I am going to go ahead and make this a face character. I am going to choose charisma as my key attribute based off of the scoundrel racket, and I'm going to start filling out the character sheet as it says. So in my, take away the roller as well, and I am going to note that my rogue is a scoundrel, and I'm going to pick charisma as my attribute. So that charisma goes up. And as it says over here, character sheet, initial proficiencies are going to be put in. There's no there's no spellcaster stuff, but there are going to be class features galore. So let us start filling all those things out from our character options So here's the character options and here's the character sheet. I'm going to move the character sheet up. I can see both of them at the same time. We are going to put all of our things in here. Expert at proficient, expert at perception, which is not a skill, but works very much like a skill. So I'm going to put in expert in prevention, expert here. My wisdom is still 0, but my proficiency is going to be a nice 4. And so that means my perception is at 4. And then saving throws, fortitude, reflex, and will. We haven't come up across saving throws yet, and we might not based on how our random character options go. For a lot of other characters, their gameplay snippets are basically saving throw focused. And in this case, our rogue elf has not had to do any of that sort of stuff, but that is fine. We are going to put in a trained and expert. And expert here. Fortitude is based on constitution, which is a nice 0, and 2 here because we're not level 1 yet. Same thing for reflex. It's going to have a dexterity of 1 and a expert of 4, which makes it 5, and our willpower is 0, but it's expert, so we have our 4 here, so we get our proficiency in here. We've talked about skill proficiency because our guard here had to use some skills in an earlier stage of character creation, and it's going to be trained in stealth, and 1 or more skills determined by your rogue's racket, and a number of additional skills equal to 7 plus your intelligence modifier, which is going to be 8 of these. Oh, let's do our attacks. So they are trained in simple martial, and they're going to be trained in simple martial and unarmed attacks. Their defenses are going to be light armor and unarmored defense, so we can just put in unarmored and light armor in here. Unarmored and light armor defense, not very good at defense. And the rogue class DC is going to be trained as well. Class DC over here is going to be trained in that. So proficiency is 2. The key is charisma, so we have a nice 2 over here. So 10 plus 2 plus 2 is a 14 class DC. And now let's do our very, very, very many skills. So we've already put in trained for stealth. In our scoundrel, trained in deception and diplomacy. So we have deception and diplomacy, and we have 8 more to do because we have 7 plus 1 for intelligence, and that makes 8 more. So at this point, it really becomes easier to see which ones you don't have, but in any case, I'm just going to go acrobatics, arcana. Just to make it faster, I'm just going to go down the line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, you know what? I'm going to swap out performance for thievery. Okay, so now I'm going to go in, and because I have a 3 in charisma, and I have all these trainings now, so I have proficiency of 2, which makes it 3. I'm going to fill these out. Okay, so I have gone through, updated my skills, and also as a part of that, I have also updated my charisma, as that went up for a lot. Stage 3, our charisma is now at 3, so actually this should be, class DC should be 15 as well. And now we are going to talk about the rogue class feature. Rogue's racket, which we have mentioned that we are a scoundrel, sneak attack, and surprise attack. So we're going to write these out into our character sheet. I looked at Avenger, and Avenger doesn't apply to this character. It's a special multi-class thing that isn't a part of level 1 usually. So I'm going to make my rogue's racket over here, go into some features, add in scoundrel racket, put in sneak attack and surprise attack special abilities right now. When your enemy can't properly defend themselves, they take extra damage. One of the most iconic parts of the rogue, which is why they're so good at dealing damage. And surprise attack, first round of combat, enemies are off guard. So I've added all the class feats and features and written them out here for the scoundrel racket, sneak attack, and surprise attack. Let's go back to OriginPath, talk about class feats, which is another thing that we have to choose. Let us take a look at all of the rogue feats that there are. In rogue, we have 6 rogue feats, so popping up our roller, let us go ahead and make it 1, 2, 6. generate 4 trap finder. So our scoundrel rogue maybe decided to become a sort of a fast talking dungeon delver instead of being a guard. And that story would be a fun one to tell. And we're just going to put in into our character sheet. I've written it out, what trap finder gives you. And that is what we have done to fill out our character sheet for our scoundrel, rogue, changeling, elf. As we go through, we have every element of a character sheet of a level 1 character. Let's go back to OriginPath, and in OriginPath we can see here we have Neophyte Adventurer all done. We put in the character sheet, and we didn't have any spells to work off of except for our initial spell that we got from our initial tradition. Let's go to the gameplay part. We can see here, first off, in class, the base DC to provide a fair challenge for this stage is 13, which can be modified. Rolls against the character should be at +3. We are going to go into, so that gives us the basic roles that we are trying to meet to have a fun experience where we can either fail or succeed based on what we're doing. And let's go to the rogue itself. And in here, what we get is you're creeping up towards your target, who is completely unaware of you with a sap in hand, seeking to knock them out. And that's the scenario. The prompt is, what brought you to a situation where your skills are focused around taking advantage of people's weaknesses? Who is your target, and why are you seeking to knock them out? And this is a skill check and a physical attack. First thing is you're going to roll the stealth skill for initiative, and that demonstrates the surprise attack feature that we have put into our character sheet. Rogue provides the surprise attack feature and gives you a little bit of a blurb about what that means. And so let us do that roll. Our stealth skill, according to our character sheet, is a 3, because dexterity 1 and a trained proficiency of 2. And we are trying to hit at 13. Okay, so in this case, did not hit the DC, it did not hit initiative of 13, which is the fair one for this. And I can say 1 plus 3 being 4 is that we're not able to use the surprise attack feature. But nevertheless, you're creeping up to your target who is completely unaware of you. Since they are completely unaware of you, in this scenario, we're just going to go ahead and say that even though you're going behind them, you can't use the surprise attack feature, but they still don't notice you. So if you use the strike action to attack your target, since they are unaware of your presence, they have the off guard condition, and which will give you a sneak attack. Let's go ahead and go and demonstrate how this works anyway, because like I said in the book, in OriginPath, sometimes the dice just aren't going to cooperate with you, and you can just like roll again or just imagine that you succeeded in order to see what the actual new power that you have actually does. Roll again for 120. 11 is pretty good, and in our melee strike section we are at a +0, and 11 would, since they are off guard, I am going to drop the DC from 13 to 11, and I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, you know what? I'm actually going to be able to see what sneak attack does. So our sap is going to do, I think, 1d6 damage. So let's roll that. We have 6 damage, finally a good roll, and then from our extra precision attack, we are going to have 4. So we did a nice 10 points of damage with one blow because of the sneak attack portion of this. Just like everything else, we are playing through a little bit of a scenario that demonstrates the new powers that your character has. And then we have a scoundrel snippet. The scenario is you've just been hit from behind and you turn around looking to avenge yourself with your agile weapon. You can't sneak up on them, but thankfully you're very gifted at feinting. The roleplay prompt here is, did you deserve to get attacked? Does throwing people off guard by feinting provide you pleasure, or do you see it as a means to an end? The challenge type is skill, check, and physical attack. First, in encounter mode, you roll the deception skill to use the feint action against your attacker. Scoundrel, as we saw, provides a stronger feint action than other characters have access to. Our deception skill, and again, I don't have the character sheet up just so that it doesn't get in the way. Actually, I'll put it up. Our deception is a nice +5, 120. Let's see if it... 3 plus 5 is 8. That is below what we need to actually successfully feint anybody. If you want to know what feint does, then we can look that up. The core rulebook, what you're supposed to do is attempt a deception check against your target's perception DC, and if you succeed, the target is off guard. Because of Scoundrel, this is even better, because the Scoundrel would make them off guard until the end of their next turn in a success, which we did not do. In fact, I think with the 3 plus 5, no, it wasn't even a critical failure, so nothing really happened. And then you're supposed to use a strike action to attack your target, dealing snag sneak attack damage if they are off guard. In this case, they're not off guard, so it is what it is. But at the very least, we attempted the feint, and we know what would have happened if we had actually been rolling decently. And then finally, we have our first level feat to attempt, which is Trap Finder. You're opening a chest that, unbeknownst to you, is trapped and will shoot a dart at you if you trip the trap. And where did you find the chest? What do you hope is inside the chest? What actually is inside? These are the kind of questions, open-ended questions that you can ask and see what actually happened. And in here, it's a skill check and defense. Those are the challenge types. We've done skill checks before. We're going to roll a perception check to detect the trap. And it also gives you a little bit of a blurb about what that means. These little summaries, they don't provide enough information to actually replace the actual text of the rules, but it helps refer to what benefit that you're getting and what benefit you're trying to demonstrate. Trap Finder, you need a perception check. Even though you weren't even searching for anything, you still get that perception check. Let's see what we get. Hey, 10. 10 is good. So we're rolling a perception check, and in our character sheet, it is going to be a +4. So 10 plus 4 is a 14, and that is above a 13. So we actually made it. We rolled a perception check to detect the trap. Another, still in encounter mode, if the trap is triggered, which it wasn't, we would roll a reflex save to avoid getting hit by the dart. And Trap Finder provides a bonus to save against trap. That demonstrates the benefits of Trap Finder as well. So that is the end of stage 5. Let's go to the next stage. Stage 6, finishing details. This stage is equivalent to steps 6 through 10 of character creation from the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Player Core Rulebook. Much of the work that is done now during regular character creation has already been accomplished because we've been updating different things like skills as we've been going through, so that we can play through the character and not just create a character for level 1 play. Because of this, we don't have that much to do, so let me pop up my character sheet again and go through it, because there's no more new options to pick. All the options that we have picked are done, and now it's just finishing details. So let's go through that, move the character sheet here while we go through here. And the purpose of this section is more of the character sheet guide of things, because all the gameplay is pretty much done. This is just finishing off and making a full level 1 character, which this isn't quite yet. Final 4 attribute boosts. This is something that is forgotten by a lot of people. Apply 4 more attribute boosts to finalize your first level character. You should have nothing lower than a -1 or higher than a 4. Also, as I've said, if you want to go back and modify something in your character, you can go ahead and do that now. Because when we started this character creation system, we didn't know that they would end up being a rogue, and so you might want to up our dexterity instead. But for now, I'm just going to put in my 4 character boosts, and I'm going to put in more charisma, more dexterity, more constitution, because rogue actually, you know what? I'm not going to do constitution. I'm just going to make this more of a ranged character, maybe. So character, charisma, dexterity, lean into the intelligence, and add a little bit of wisdom as well. And now they're actually going to be level 1. Which means that all of the proficiencies that we talked about are going to be updated by 1, and that is talked about in the character sheet, level 1 character sheet option part of OriginPath. And it also says, hey, that club and that hand crossbow that you might have had from before, get rid of them, because they were for kids. They're training materials essentially. And we go through the actual Pathfinder 2nd Edition system of having 15 gold pieces, which you can spend on whatever you need. I'm not going to go through that here, but in here I'm going to make sure that my perception is up to date. My perception is going to be a proficiency of 5 because it's expert plus level 1, for example, and just go through that and the savings throws, which have gone up by having a wisdom of 1, for example. So this is going to be a proficiency of 5, being an expert, a wisdom of 1, so that's a will of 6, for example, and it goes like that. You make sure your perception, your saving throws, your armor class, your melee and range strikes. You go through all of these, update your skills, your class DC, and spell attacks and spell DCs, and magical tradition, which doesn't really apply here because we only have one spell, and that spell doesn't really it just detects magic automatically. You don't really need to do any sort of a roll for it. And if you go through these things and update your character sheet and spend your 15 gold, you will have a full character. I haven't named this character yet, so why don't I name them something like... whatever. That sounds like an elfy enough name. And we are done. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed me going through this video. I don't know how long it'll end up being. This whole system, all of the rules and all of the guidance that it provides and all of the different roleplay prompts that it has for the first level options from the Player Core rulebook, they're all available now at itch and on drivethrurpg, and all the links are going to be in the description. And like I said before, all of my own proceeds for this are going to go to Palestinian relief. So thank you so much. I'm really happy with the way this turned out. I'm really happy with how good it looks, which has nothing to do with me and has everything to do with Eldritch Osiris Games. And yeah, thank you.